All right, guys, so this is going to be part 3 in the rest of the chapter of chapter 19. So, potassium. Potassium balance, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. So, it is the terms for potassium in the blood are hyperkalemia, hypokalemia. And potassium, remember, is really important because potassium is necessary for the sodium potassium pump to work, it's necessary for action potentials to work. So, it's a very critical ion to have in the body. And just, real quick, that potassium is going to be controlled again, largely by the PCT. So in the PCT, proximal tubule, it's freely filtered and also reabsorbed. So the bulk of it's going to get reabsorbed in the PCT, and then the DCT and collecting ducts are also going to absorb and secrete potassium. So not a lot of detail here. Keep in mind that potassium is going to be mediated by aldosterone. So aldosterone is going to excrete excess potassium when it's around. But that's it for potassium. So let's just move on to calcium. So calcium is also really important. Hypercalcemia, hypocalcemia, high and low calcium. So I've written down that calcium is involved in many, many activities in our bodies. We looked at it as a muscle contraction, right? Calcium stored in sarcoplasmic reticulum. It's necessary in the interstitial environment for the heart, for smooth muscles. It's triggering secretion of our neurotransmitters. It triggers secretion of insulin. So those are the things I have in the notes, and those are the came to my head at first. So there we go. So now, where do we have calcium in the body? So calcium is going to be in our bone primarily. So our storage tissue is going to be our bones. And calcium is mediated by 3 different hormones. So there's parathyroid hormone, there's calcitonin, and then there's a really long name. So if you look at your outline, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, but it's calcitriol. So it's vitamin D3. It's the active form of vitamin D3. So it's right here. Notice it has D3, but the active form is also called calcitriol. Okay, active D3. So calcitonin is the hormone that is going to reabsorb. Actually, let's start with the start. Let's start with parathyroid hormone, which is in your notes. So parathyroid hormone is secreted from the parathyroid glands. They are, remember, on the posterior surface of your thyroid gland. They're going to respond to a decrease in calcium. So parathyroid hormone, when you have a drop in calcium, that hormone is going to get secreted. It's going to tell your osteoclasts, right, from the bone to work harder to reabsorb the calcium from the bone. So this is going to be your osteoclasts are activated by parathyroid hormone. They're going to degrade and get the calcium from your bone, put it into the bloodstream. It's going to also increase, so this is going to increase our plasma calcium concentration. So the parathyroid hormone also, if you look at it, it increases the calcium reabsorption by the kidneys. So reabsorption by the kidneys, parathyroid hormone stimulates calcitonin. Reabsorption is, this is weirdly, parathyroid hormone stimulates reabsorption. That's what it's saying. So the calcium is going to move from our tubules into the plasma because of parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid hormone also stimulates the activation of our D3 inside of our kidneys. So it's going to activate get that ball rolling on the pathway to get the active D3 or calcitriol. All right, so if you look at the amount of calcium that's reabsorbed anyway, so if you go back to the calcium in letter B, 99% of our calcium is reabsorbed. So there's a very small amount that we're losing. So that small amount will get reabsorbed from the kidney under parathyroid hormone and also under the calcitriol. So let's move on to calcitriol. We can see that calcitriol is derived from dietary D3. So let's look here. So we can get D3 from our foods. So that's why it has digestive tract here. We absorb this D3, and it has to go to the liver to get activated. So here, where is this D3? Oh, the kidneys, I'm sorry, the kidneys to get activated. So I just want to point out that in this flow chart, we can see that the GI tract from food, and also if you remember the skin, right, the skin also can create this precursor of D3. So that is going to create this upper concentration of D3. This is then going to take 2 trips. It goes to the liver to convert it to another form. Don't need to worry about that form. Then that form travels in the bloodstream to the kidneys, and this is where you ultimately get the active form of D3. And so you're going to get an increase in concentration of the active form. Again, this is calcitriol. And then that, since it's active, it will work on your kidneys and will work on your GI tract to increase calcium absorption. So you may have heard that when you need vitamin D in order to absorb calcium in the gut, which is true. So when you take in D3 through your diet and eat foods that are high in vitamin D, you do have to convert that vitamin D to an active form. So that active form is going to help your body take in more calcium that's in the gut. Out of the food that you just ate, it'll try and extract more calcium. And it'll also tell your kidneys to help to reabsorb more calcium, so to increase calcium concentration. Okay, so just remember that your D3 does go to the liver and then kidneys, and then it becomes active. And then the active form of D3 can go to GI tract and kidneys to reabsorb your calcium. All right, and so, and then our calcitonin is our antagonistic hormone to those two. So calcitonin is going to take that increase in blood plasma calcium and then put it into your bones. So it's going to stimulate bone deposition, right? It's going to stimulate your osteoblasts to build more bone, to deposit that calcium. And it's also going to tell your kidneys to stop reabsorbing. Okay, so that's the story of calcium, those 3 hormones. You want to know their functions. This is just a larger flow chart showing you the interactions of what we just talked about. So low calcium concentrations in the blood will tell your parathyroid hormones to secrete parathyroid hormone. That will talk to both your bones and your kidneys. The parathyroid hormone can help to reabsorb the bone directly, right, by telling your osteoclasts to take the calcium out of your bone, put it into the blood. Then it can talk to your kidneys to upregulate calcium reabsorption, and that's going to limit the amount of calcium excreted in your urine. It's also going to activate the process to get your active D3. The active D3 will go to your kidneys and the GI tract to absorb calcium. All right, so last topic will be, question before we move on. Which of the following substances is secreted in the presence of increased calcium levels in the blood? We can pause to think about it. Answer is A, calcitonin. All right, acid base. Acid base is critical. We have a homeostatic pH of 7.4, and deviating a little away from that is can create acidosis or alkalosis. So you can see that we have this 7.35 to 7.45 window. If you go lower or higher than that, then you have problems. And so we need to buffer the amount of acids or hydrogen ions in our bloodstream. And we do that a couple ways. So first of all, where do we get our disturbances in acid base, right? So it's from the diet and it's also from metabolism. So the input to our concentration of hydrogen, right? Because ultimately, what does pH stand for? Power of hydrogen. So we're looking at the hydrogen ion concentration. The diet, proteins and fats. Fats, so the majority of the acids are going to come from your diet. Proteins can be acidic. Some of the amino acids are acidic. Of course, some of the amino acids are basic, but you do have acidic amino acids. They can contribute to the hydrogen ions. And fats, they're fatty acids. That's the full name. So they have those 3 fatty acid tails. They act as acids, meaning that they can donate free hydrogen ions to a solution and create a low pH, create an acid. Also from metabolism, right? So we know that when we breathe, when we have cellular respiration, not when we breathe, but when we cellularly respire, we are making CO2 as a waste product. When your muscles are active and cells are active and they undergo anaerobic fermentation or anaerobic respiration, they can make lactic acid. And the breakdown of fats and proteins can create keto acids. All of them contribute to the blood hydrogen ion concentration. Now, how do we get rid of this extra acid? 2 ways, our kidneys and our lungs. So we talked about our lungs and how carbon dioxide acts. It basically is an acid in the bloodstream because it's carbonic anhydrase changes it to bicarbonate and a hydrogen ion. And the way we get rid of that is breathing out. And then our kidneys are the other way we get rid of hydrogen ions, and those are going to be excreted. So the 3 areas of defense when we talk about acid-base disturbances, we can buffer. This is the fastest, okay? This is going to be the first thing your body is going to do. It's the fastest. I'm actually jumping ahead a little bit. I'm past B. I'm talking about C right now, but we'll come back to B. So when you have excess amount of hydrogen ions, that bicarbonate that is in your bloodstream will bind to it. It can also, the bicarbonate will bind to it. You also have these other lesser known buffers that are proteins and phosphates. So proteins can actually accept hydrogen ions. Remember that hemoglobin, so we have bicarbonate, proteins. Remember how hemoglobin can bind to hydrogen ions? So proteins can actually absorb free hydrogen ions. And remember, pH is just the free floating protons, the free floating hydrogen ions that contribute to pH. If that hydrogen ion is bound to a molecule, it's no longer part of pH. It's not active in driving the acidity or alkalinity. So we're talking about free hydrogen ions. So as long as it's bound to something like a protein, it doesn't act to change pH. Phosphates as well, okay? HPO4, -2, can actually absorb a hydrogen ion to become H2PO4. This is reversible, okay? So phosphates in the bloodstream can also buffer the hydrogen ions. Second line of defense, the second thing that happens if we start to move to an acidic environment is respiration compensation, or I shouldn't say acid, but if we start to change, we can either increase or decrease ventilation, so breathing. And then our third line of defense, which takes longer to buffer the hydrogen ions, is renal. So this is the kidney, right? And kidneys have to secrete our hydrogen ions, and they either recycle or they create new bicarbonate. So we'll look at that. Okay, coming back to letter B. So just to give you guys the concept of metabolic acidosis and metabolic alkalosis, coming back to here. So from metabolism, so there's 2 different mechanisms where you can mediate your pH, because there's 2 mechanisms here. This is our kidneys and our lungs are the 2 organs that can help with pH of our body. So there is respiratory disturbances that can cause changes in pH, right? So we call that respiratory acidosis or respiratory alkalosis. Okay, that's due to this carbon dioxide buildup. Or you can have metabolic acidosis or metabolic alkalosis. Okay, so that this pH change is independent of the carbon dioxide concentration. So something else is causing your blood to become acidic or basic. So that's all that letter B was talking about. And if you look at the metabolic disturbances, I have some examples listed. So metabolic acidosis, so other than CO2, what can cause metabolic acidosis? And that is a high protein diet, high fat diet. This is the keto diet. right? Because again, high protein, high fat, the byproduct of that metabolism is ketones, which is acid. It can be heavy exercise because heavy exercise is going to create lactic acid. And severe diarrhea will lose bicarbonate. So if you lose bicarbonate, you're not going to have that buffer, and the free acids that are there will increase. That is another metabolic acidosis. And then if your kidneys fail, right, they can't secrete the hydrogen ions, and then there you go, you're going to have acidosis. Metabolic alkalosis in your notes, what can drive your body to become more alkaline, independent of CO2, is vomiting. So you know that your gastric juices have a lot of acid. So if you're continuously vomiting, you're losing acids. And so you can become alkaline. Your blood can become alkaline. You can consume alkaline products. And again, renal dysfunction. So let's take a look at the bicarbonate and hydrogen ion exchange here. So renal compensation, number 3 in your outline. PCT and DCT, 2 places. So this is a picture of PCT, proximal convoluted tubule. So what's happening here is that we have bicarbonate reabsorption is coupled with hydrogen secretion. If the blood is acidic, right, so we have a lot of hydrogen ions coming in the, so this is tubular fluid here. We have a lot of hydrogen ions. What we want to do, we have backwards. We have a lot of hydrogen ions. I'm getting mixed up here in this picture. Yes, we want to secrete. So yeah, the hydrogen ions are coming from here. It's not shown, but their hydrogen ions are coming from the bloodstream into the tubular fluid. So what we have here is the blood is acidic. The filtrate will have lots of H2CO3, okay? So the blood is going to have H2CO3 because here's your carbonic anhydrase reaction. So the blood has already done this, right? You have a lot of H2CO3, this in the blood. So it's the acid form in the blood. And so your kidneys want to take this apart and just get rid of that hydrogen ion. So what happens is the H2CO3 that's filtered in the kidneys from the bloodstream is going to interact with a membrane-bound carbonic anhydrase. That membrane-bound carbonic anhydrase will break down the H2CO3 into water and carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide is going to enter into the proximal tubule cells. There's another carbonic anhydrase. So the carbonic anhydrase is both on the membrane and also inside the cell, and that's going to turn that CO2 back into H2CO3. So notice that we had to break down H2CO3. There's no mechanism to bring this into the cell directly, so it has to be broken down. The carbon dioxide diffuses into the cell, and the carbonic anhydrase there changes it back. Seems silly to do this, but it changes it back. And then that will naturally dissociate. Remember how it naturally dissociates into this free hydrogen ion. Now we have a free hydrogen ion that we can get rid of. So it is going to get pumped out of the cell. And that's going to enter into our tubular fluid and then ultimately become urine. So this acid is going to get moved into the fluid, into the filtrate by this mechanism. All right. So coming into the filtrate is carbonic acid. And then that carbonic acid gets broken down by apical carbonic anhydrase. The CO2 diffuses into the cell. It gets reformed into carbonic acid, dissociates spontaneously into the free hydrogen ions, and the free hydrogen ions are pumped out. Now, what happens to this guy, the bicarbonate? The bicarbonate gets recycled, so it's going to get pumped out, see H2CO3, H2CO3, and then ultimately go back into the bloodstream. So in the PCT, the first sentence in your outline is bicarbonate is reabsorbed, and then hydrogen is secreted. Okay, and so 80 to 90% of our bicarbonate is reabsorbed. And then the other 10 to 20%, that's going to be quote unquote newly made. So let's see what happens in the DCT. So in the DCT, what happens here is that because the PCT, the proximal convoluted tubule, has taken care of a lot of that H2CO3, right? So we had that H2CO3 in high amounts in the PCT, that we're no longer going to have a lot of bicarbonate. So most of that bicarbonate has been removed by the PCT. That bicarbonate has gone to the bloodstream, right? So this bicarbonate here is going to get pumped back into the bloodstream. We're basically removing what could have been bicarbonate, or taking that out of the filtrate, and we're putting it back in the blood. So by the time that filtrate moves to the DCT, we don't have a lot of this. So we don't have a lot of bicarbonate. So because of this, hydrogen ions are moved into the filtrate, and it gets very, very acidic. So you're going to have a very, very acidic filtrate, right? Because in the PCT, we have pumping of those hydrogen ions into the filtrate. But your urine actually doesn't get super, super acidic. So your urine is always buffered. The lowest pH your urine can have is 4.5. So what buffers the hydrogen ions here? And this is going to be phosphate. Okay, so because carbonic anhydrase is inside the cytosol, okay, it can create bicarbonate ions. And we are relying on the CO2 coming as a gas from our bloodstream, and water is always around. So we have this carbonic anhydrase reaction going, making carbonic acid, and then our bicarbonate, and then our hydrogen ions. Our hydrogen ions are pumped out. So this is just what happens in the PCT. But instead of just remaining hydrogen ions and contributing to the acid, it's bound also to your phosphate. Okay, so it's bound, so this reaction, right? So you have phosphate ions accepting that hydrogen, and then your urine stays within a pH range. The reason why they say that this is newly made bicarbonate that gets pumped out and then goes back into the bloodstream, so you can add more bicarbonate to the bloodstream, is because you didn't start off with bicarbonate. You see in this page, there's no other bicarbonates on the page. What we did was we started off with CO2 and H2O. And then we have that carbonic anhydrase. So this is kind of newly made, and so it's pumped back in the blood. So that's why we have new bicarbonate ions produced here in the DCT and in the collecting duct. Okay, so in an emergency, the last step here that your kidneys can do if you're very, very acidic is to metabolize glutamine. So glutamine is an amino acid, and glutamine can be broken down. And so what happens here is that it makes ammonia. And when you break down glutamine, you can see you can make a bicarbonate, which gets pumped out, but you can also make ammonia, and the ammonia can accept a hydrogen ion. So it becomes ammonium, and ammonium is pumped out. So if you have a super, super acidic environment, you can actually break down glutamine to absorb more hydrogen ions. All right, in the form of ammonium. So then ammonium is going to be excreted from the body in urine. All right, so last topic here is just looking at all of the acid-base disturbances. So this is just going through again, respiratory acidosis, respiratory alkalosis, metabolic acidosis, and metabolic alkalosis. So we have our pH, right? If we go under 7.35, it's acidosis. So don't worry about this. Let's just talk about this in terms of concepts. So metabolic acidosis. Metabolic acidosis, you can have respiratory compensation. Respiratory acidosis leads to renal compensation. You can have alkalosis. Metabolic alkalosis can lead to respiratory compensation. Respiratory alkalosis leads to renal compensation. So again, don't worry about the numbers, but you realize that they can compensate for each other, right? If you have a metabolic acidity, you can compensate for it with the other system, right? So if one system is failing, the other system can pick up the slack. So respiratory acidosis, if we just move through the notes, the cause of this could be hypoventilation, right? Respiratory acidosis is that you have hypoventilation. You're breathing slow. You're not getting the carbon dioxide out, and the hydrogen ion carbon dioxide is increasing. And so compensation is going to be that you can excrete the H pluses, right? Your kidneys can pick up the slack. And they can create more and reabsorb more HCO3. Bicarbonate. When you have respiratory alkalosis, let's just move down the list. Respiratory alkalosis, what is that? We can hyperventilate, right? If you hyperventilate, you're losing a lot of CO2, your blood becomes alkaline, your kidneys can pick up the slack because they can decrease the amount of hydrogen ions they're secreting, and they can decrease the amount of bicarbonate, okay? If you think about it, this is great because obviously if something's wrong with the respiratory system and you are not functioning correctly there, then you have your kidneys that can, I said pick up the slack, but they can mediate that pH change because your two organs are, again, kidneys and lung. For metabolic acidosis, some kind of increase in hydrogen ion, either you are taking in more acidic foods, you're on the keto diet, but you can compensate by hyperventilating, right? To breathe faster, get that carbon dioxide out. And then renal compensation, you can also have renal compensation. So those things are listed in your outline. Same things. Metabolic alkalosis, right? Metabolic alkalosis. This can be caused by, again, increased vomiting or eating foods that are very, very basic, or somehow getting a lot of bicarbonate or some kind of alkaline foods in you. The respiratory system can compensate, right? So you're going to decrease your hypoventilate. So you increase your CO2 in your bloodstream, and then the renal, you can also have your kidneys by decreasing the hydrogen ion secretion, decreasing the bicarbonate reabsorption. Okay, so they are working together to maintain acid-base homeostasis. So I'll end with some questions. Which of the following is not a defense mechanism against acid-base disturbances? The answer is A. Which of the following is not a function of angiotensin II? The answer is C. In the renal handling of potassium, which hormone increases the number of sodium-potassium pumps on the basolateral membrane? The answer is aldosterone. Which of the following hormones increases sodium excretion by increasing GFR and decreasing sodium reabsorption? And that would be A, atrial natriuretic peptide. Which of the following does not result from a decrease in MAP, mean arterial pressure? And the answer is C. Which of the following occurs as a result of an increase in acids in the plasma from sources other than carbon dioxide? The answer is metabolic acidosis. The catabolism of glutamine is in the epithelial cells of the PCT yields what? And it's going to yield ammonium. All right, that is the end.